Okay, we're going to go to Tanya now. Very interesting part of Tanya, very fundamental part of Tanya. So last week you finished Perek Gimel. Today we're going to start Perek Dalid. On the top it's page Ches. At the bottom of most Tanyas is page 14, if you want to follow. Okay, story up to now, the Alter Rebbe said that the Neshama is composed of 10 levels, intellect and emotions. And the Alter Rebbe explained what Chochmah was, the initial flash, Bina is the broadening of it, Das is binding yourself to it, becoming one with it. And then he said that gives birth to the Midas of Ava V'Yirah. Now in Perek Daled, the Alter Rebbe says like this. The first few Perakim of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe is speaking about the godly soul. Later on, he'll speak about the animal soul, that they also have the same 10 qualities that the godly soul has and so on. But he says, in addition to the 10 levels of intellect and emotions, every godly soul has Shleisha Levushim, 3 garments. And I'll explain why they're called garments. What are the 3 garments of the soul, of the godly soul? Machshava, Dibur, Umaisa, thought, speech, and action. Shal Tayag Mitzvah Satera, of the 613 mitzvahs of Torah. Meaning like this. The soul itself is intellect and emotions. At least what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. We discussed already in Pasuk Elio and Torah, the Alter Rebbe says differently, but in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says, what is the soul? Intellect and emotions. Here, the Alter Rebbe is explaining that in addition to that, the soul has 3 garments. Now, what's this concept of garments? Garments, you put on, take off. You put them on, you can take them off. You're not bound by the garments. Secondly, what is the purpose of a garment? The Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan called his garment mechabdusa, what honored him. Garments is the way a person, well, it used to be when people were normal, the way a person could reveal himself in public is when he wears garments. So what are garments? Garments are not the soul. Garments are not the person. They reflect the person. They honor the person. And that's the way the person actually reveals himself. So in other words, how does the soul reveal itself? How do you reveal the intellect and emotions? This is through thought, speech, and action. But they're called garments because, number one, you don't always have to think or talk or do, even though thinking you always have to think. We'll get to that soon. But you don't have to always speak. You don't always have to do. And therefore, you can put them on, you can put them off. You can take them, use them or not use them. But they're the way you reveal yourself. Because we're talking about the godly soul, so we're talking about thought, speech, and action of Torah and mitzvahs. We're not speaking about thought, speech, and the action of evil, because we're talking about the godly soul, which is a part of Hashem. So how does the godly soul reveal godly intellect, godly emotions? It's through thought, speech, and action. And let me explain very simple what it means. If I know something, I know an intellectual concept, but it's not always revealed in my head. I could be doing business. I could be doing something else. Not everything I know in my brain is always revealed. I could know some Gemara, but if I'm learning Chumash, or I'm doing some business, or I'm eating dinner, I mean, that thing is not revealed. Not even to myself. It's there. It's in my brain. But how do I reveal it? So there's 3 ways of revealing it. I can reveal it to myself by thinking. When I think about it, then it reveals that concept that I had in my mind before. It's there in my brain, but it's not revealed. How do I reveal it to myself? By thinking it. How do I reveal it to you? If I want to teach you something, how do I read it? Thinking is not going to get you to do it, unless if you're the Tzemach Tzedek and a Hillel Baracher. But how do I reveal it to you? I speak it. So what am I doing when I speak? I'm taking this concept, the intellectual concept in my brain, and I'm revealing it to you. Thought revealed it to myself. Speaking reveals it to you. Action reveals itself into something else. I write it down. I put it into action. The same thing is with emotions, midos. Somebody loves their family, okay? But, when they're working in business, they're not thinking about the family necessarily. They love them, it's there in the heart, but they're not thinking about the family. Now they're working on a deal. How do I reveal that midah, that feeling, that emotion to myself? I'll think about how much I love them. If I want to reveal it to them, how much I love them, or fear them, or have awe of them, I will say it to them. I love you, I respect you, which is fear. These are different ways of revealing the me. How can I reveal it in a lower way? If I give you a kiss, that reveals in action that I love you. I mean, if it's a real kiss, not the, it's a real kiss that you really love the person. So thinking about the emotion reveals it to me. Speaking about the emotion reveals it to somebody else. And action, I give you a gift or I give you a kiss, that reveals it in action. There's a famous story where the Rebbe Rashab was once learning, mentioned this a while ago in the classes. Rebbe Rashab was once learning with another chassid. They were learning chassidus. And when they finished learning, the previous Rebbe was then a baby in the crib. And they walked by the crib, and the previous Rebbe was a very handsome baby. And when they walked by, and the chassid said to the Rebbe, "Look how gorgeous your baby is." And the Rebbe Rashab had an urge to give him a kiss. But he didn't. He went out and he wrote him a Hasidic discourse. He wrote a Hasidic discourse, a mimer. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe got older, when the previous Rebbe was older, the Rebbe Rashab gave it to him, and he said, "This is a Hasidic kush. This is a Hasidic kiss." And the Rebbe explained, that's the story. And the Rebbe explained, why is this a Hasidic kiss? And the Rebbe explains that it says in the Gemara, by the Ten Commandments, Anechi Hashem Elokecha. Yeah, I am God, you're God. And the Gemara says in Shabbos, we mentioned this a while ago. Anechi is an acronym. It's spelled Aleph Nun Chof Yud. It stands for Ana Nafshi Ksavis Yahavis. Simply it means, Hashem says, I wrote the book, I myself wrote it and gave it. That's the simple meaning of the Gemara. The Hashem says, who's the author of the book? I wrote it and I gave it to you. I autographed it for you. The Alter Rebbe interprets it much deeper. It's not, I wrote it myself and gave it myself. Hashem says, and this is the greatness of Torah that we're going to soon learn. I'm saying it because not today, but when we get into it, we'll understand what this means. The Alter Rebbe says what it means is not I myself wrote it. And non nafshik savis yavis means, Alter Rebbe says, I wrote myself and I gave myself. What does it mean? Hashem says, I wrote myself and I gave myself. Hashem's essence is in the Torah. Hashem says, when I gave you guys the Torah, the Jewish people, when I gave you guys the Torah, I want you to know I'm not just giving you a book. I am giving you my essence because my essence was written and given. So the Rebbe explains, the Medrash says, Tzadikim daimim lebeiram, Tzadikim are similar to God. And therefore the Rebbe says that when a Rebbe writes a discourse or says a discourse, it's not that he's saying a discourse. He's putting himself, his essence, into the discourse that he says or writes. The essence of the Rebbe is in the discourse that he says or wrote. And therefore he says like this, when the Rebbe Rashab had an urge to kiss the previous Rebbe because he was so beautiful, a kiss is really, if you think about it, external. I can kiss you and stab you at the same time. Don't do it at home yet. But what is a deeper level? What's a real Chassidish kiss? The Rebbe Rashab said, why should I express my external action of kissing as a sign of love? I'm going to give him something much more. I'm going to give him my essence. And therefore, Hashem's essence is in the thought, speech, and action of Torah. Therefore, when a person thinks Torah, speaks Torah, acts Torah, meaning mitzvahs, they connect themselves to the essence of Hashem. And he says like this, when a person fulfills an action, called mitzvahs, maisias, all action mitzvahs. Uvedibur, and with speech, ho'esik beferish kol taryag mitzvahs. He explains all these meaning of the 613 mitzvahs. Ubemachshava, and in a thought, humasik kol ma'she'ef shelo lahasik, whatever he's able to understand. Bepardes hatera, pardes hatera, pardes simply means orchard, but it stands for pshat, remez, drush, and so, which I'll discuss in a minute. He says like this: why does a person have 613? Why did God give us six? No, let's go the other way. Sorry. A person we know has 248 limbs and 365 sinews or veins, whichever way you want to call it. Why is it that God made a person with 248 limbs or organs and 365 veins? Why did Hashem give us 248 positive and 365 negative? So it's interesting. The Rambam, in his Akdama, in his introduction, writes the 248 mitzvahs correspond with the 248 limbs of a person, which means every limb should do a mitzvah. Why 365 negative mitzvahs, the Rambam says? Because there's 365 days in the solar calendar, so every day do a mitzvah. In Kabbalah, it says the 365 doesn't correspond with the days of the solar calendar. It corresponds with the 365 veins or sinews that a person has. By the way, women have, the Gemara in Becheda says either 252, 254, there are various different opinions. But men have 248 limbs and 365 veins. Why? Why does a person have 248 and 365? Because a person comes from God. In godliness, there's 248 positive mitzvahs, and there's 365 negative commandments. Therefore, the person who is a part of God even the body. Like we spoke Monday night, Hashem chose our body, which comes from the essence of Hashem. Hashem said you have 365 veins and 248 limbs because that's what I have. 248 mitzvahs and 365 veins. He says like this. When a person fulfills 248, or here he says a tayag mitzvahs. When a person keeps all 613 mitzvahs in thought, or in speech, or in action, so what happens when that happens? Hare klolos tayag evare nafshe, the 613 limbs of his neshama, lubashim betayag mitzvahs hatera, come into the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah, which means when a person, the neshama, takes his intellect and his emotions and brings them down into thought of holiness, speech of holiness, action of holiness, they actually connect to the 613 aspects of Torah, which is one with Hashem. So therefore, he says, this is the way the garment reveals itself. And by the way, the Rebbe will explain later on in Tanya, the level of my neshama, like we learned in the second parak, my neshama, what level it is not up to me. I can't become a tzaddik if I wasn't born with the ability to become a tzaddik. But the garments, thought, speech, and action, that every single Jew has the ability to serve God in thought, speech, and action. And that's why, as Alter Rebbe will explain later on in Tanya, when he speaks about the Beinani that we learned in the first parak, is a guy that never, ever, ever sins. But where doesn't he sin? Not in thought, not in speech, not in action. That every Jew could do. So in addition to the 10 levels of the soul, intellect and emotions, there's 3 garments, and he's playing garments. Number one, you can change on and off. And secondly, they're the way you reveal yourself. How does the neshama, the godly neshama, reveal its godly intellect and godly feelings, emotions? It's through thought, speech, and action of Torah. When you think Torah, you speak Torah, you do Torah, that's the way you're revealing and connecting your soul with Hashem. You could be a very lofty soul. You could be a holy, super holy, holy roller soul. If you don't think Torah, you don't speak Torah, and you don't do Torah, you're worthless. The greatness of your soul is wasted. If you're a simple neshama, simple Jew, and yet you do as much as you can in thought, speech, and action, then you connect to Hashem in a complete way. You mamish connect to Hashem completely.
You can have such a thing.
What?
You can have such a thing as a person with a very lofty soul, not thinking.
A person can have a very lofty soul and not do anything with it. And not do anything with it. He wastes his time. You should know the evil people that the Torah mentions, the Kairachs and the Esavs and the Bilams and the Lavans and all those people, their souls were super lofty. Super, super lofty souls. But they came down and they sinned. They ruined it. That's what happens if they don't utilize it. Listen, a person can be blessed with a brilliant head. Brilliant head. But if they don't use it, nothing's going to happen with it. So you can't, but they have a brilliant head. So what? If they don't use it, it's one of the few things in life that the more you use it, the better it gets. That's called the brain. The more you use it, the better it gets. And he says, so you connect to Hashem completely. Ubepratius in a more detailed. Chabad shebenafshe, the intellectual levels of his soul. Torah, Chochmah, Bina, and Das. Melubeshes ba'asagas haTorah, dresses itself into the understanding of Torah. Shehu masig, as much as he's able to understand in pshat, which means the simple meaning. Remez means what things are like hinted to, numerical values, acronym. Drush is the homiletical part of Torah. And Sod is the Kabbalistic part of Torah. Based on his mental capabilities of understanding, and also Sheiresh Nafshi Lamaila, the level of his soul, the way it is from above. Okay, because there's two things. A greater soul can attain a greater level of Torah, even though the brains might be better. But a lofty soul, because they're more connected to God, can understand deeper Torah than a regular person. And there's a famous story with the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov said, any question that he's asked, he could answer, and any statement he is told, he could refute. In Torah learning. Any statement you say, he could refute it, and any statement you say, any question you ask, he can answer it. So he asked, how does that work? So he explained very interestingly. He says, Torah is in each level. Remember, the neshamas are in each level. There's Torah the way it is in Atzilus, the way it is in Bria, the way it is in Yitzira, the way it is in Asiya. In fact, the four levels of Torah, Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod, the simple meaning is the world of Asiya. Remez is the world of Yitzira. Drush is the level of Bria. Sod, secrets, is the level of Atzilus. Okay? So let's say I learned something, and in the world of Bria, I don't understand it. Okay, I don't understand it. I have a question. But in the higher world of Atzilus, it's not a question. Because over there, there's an answer to it. In a lower level, you have a question. But if you can reach a higher level, then you can have an answer. You ask a greater mind, he can answer a question that you have. The same thing is in the reverse. A brilliant person, if you tell him a concept, he can ask you so many questions, he can make you crazy that you don't understand it. So the Baal Shem Tov said as follows. Baal Shem Tov knew who he was. Baal Shem Tov said his neshama is a very lofty neshama. If you ask him a question in Bria, he can go to Atzilus and answer the question. You'll say a statement in Bria, he can go up to Atzilus and refute it. Because people based on the neshama, that's what Alter Rebbe says here, two things. It's based on your understanding. In other words, your mental capabilities. You have a better head, you can understand more. Not such a good head, you'll understand less. But it also has to do with the level of the neshama. That's the quality of godliness. The connection to godliness. The godly aspect of the Torah. That is based on a higher neshama. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, when a person learns in thought, speech, and action, then they connect to the Tayag mitzvahs, which are the Tayag limbs of Hashem, Kaviyachol. Hashem has, so to speak, 248 limbs, which are the 248 mitzvahs, and the 365 neged, and the commandments correspond with veins. So Hashem obviously doesn't have physical veins and physical limbs. But just like the purpose of a limb accomplishes thing, the mitzvah reveals godliness in a certain way. And the same thing with the veins. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. When a person has thought, speech, and action of Torah mitzvahs, and whatever needs to be thought. Some mitzvahs, by the way, you need to think. Some mitzvahs, you need to speak. Some mitzvahs you need to do. If you have to bench lulav, you can't speak about doing lulav. You have to physically hold the lulav and esrog. If you want to light candles, you can't say in orally, okay, I'm going to light candles. It doesn't do anything. You can think all the Kabbalistic meanings of tefillin, or Shabbos candles, or lulav. You could think in your mind and speak all the brilliant concepts of lulav and tefillin. Guess what? You don't put it on in action, it's worthless. I mean, not worthless. You got some good thoughts, but it is what?
What mitzvah do we have in thought?
There's a mitzvah of loving Hashem, which is also in thought. It's the heart, but it's revealed through thought. There's mitzvahs of da'as elokei avicha, to understand godliness. There's a lot of mitzvahs that we do that are connected to thought. Most mitzvahs are connected to action. Why? Because this is an action world. But the Rebbe brings down in a Yen, by the way, and it's a very important thing, which I'm sure most of you know already. In the city of the Baal Shem Tov, the Rebbe brings it down in a Yen. In the city of the Baal Shem Tov, two Jews got into a fight. It happens, even in the city of the Baal Shem Tov. And one guy said to the next, I'm going to rip you apart like a fish. Okay? Or in English, we'll say, I'm going to kill you. So the Baal Shem Tov heard what happened. And the Baal Shem Tov students, when they sat, the Baal Shem Tov had 60 students. When they sat around the Baal Shem Tov, they sat around the table like a ches. They sat around a rectangular table. And the Baal Shem Tov sat at the head, and he was able to see all the students. When the Baal Shem Tov wanted the students to go on a high, they didn't smoke marijuana. He wanted the students to go on a high. The Baal Shem Tov would tell the students, put your hands on each other. And they would sing a niggun. And then in the middle of the niggun, the Baal Shem Tov would put his hands on the two students near him, basically closing the circuit, and they would see a vision. The Baal Shem Tov did that many times with the students. He showed them spiritual visions. So what happens? When the Baal Shem Tov heard this guy tell the other guy, I'm going to rip you apart like a fish, the Baal Shem Tov told him to hold hands. He's saying a niggun. And the Baal Shem Tov closed the circuit. And all of a sudden, all the students started screaming. What happened? The vision that they saw was the guy actually ripping apart his friend. Ripping him apart. And it was scary. The Baal Shem Tov took off his hands, and the vision stopped. So the Baal Shem Tov explained to his students, and so you think it's really remarkable in life, very, very important in life. The Baal Shem Tov said to his students, there's a world of thought, there's a world of speech, and there's a world of action. This world is an action world. Therefore, if I say I'm going to put on tefillin, I think I'm going to put on tefillin, it's worthless. You have to put on tefillin. It's an action world. But there is a world of speech. And if I say I'm going to kill you, in the world of speech, I killed you. Not in action world, because in action I didn't kill you. This world is an action world. But in the world of speech, I killed you. If I think I'm going to kill you, in the world of thought, I killed you. Now, physically, you can still be walking around, because in the world of action, I didn't kill you. But in the world of thought, I killed you. So thought, speech, and action are extremely, extremely powerful. There's a famous term, we'll conclude with this. The Mendel Futterfass, when he could have gotten out of Russia, by the way, but he went back in to save other people, and he ended up many years in Siberia. But his family was out, they were already in England. And the Mendel Futterfass was in Russia, and he had a depressing moment. He couldn't write a letter to the Rebbe. He couldn't write it because It was communist Russia. There's no way you could write a letter. So he thought he's going to think a pidyon to the Rebbe. He's going to think a letter to the Rebbe. A little while later, his wife, who didn't write to the Rebbe, got an answer from the Rebbe's office that I received your pidyon nefesh, and the Rebbe answered. And she didn't know what it meant. She never wrote to the Rebbe. When Reb Mendel came out and they were talking about this, he realized that was the time when he thought a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe answered it. We mentioned the story of Rabbi Parcher. Just with this, we'll close. Rabbi Parcher was a very special Jew. Anyway, he came to the Tzemach Tzedek. He said, "Rabbi, I need to hear I need to hear Chassidic discourse. I need it." Tzemach Tzedek said, "I don't feel well. It's hard for me to talk. I can't do it." So what happened? So they were arguing. Finally, Rabbi Parcher said to the Tzemach Tzedek, "Rebbe, you know what? Think it. Don't speak it. Think it." And Tzemach Tzedek said, "That I could do." Rabbi Parcher stood opposite the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek thought a discourse. Rabbi Parcher was listening, so to speak, of the Tzemach Tzedek's thought, and he went out and he repeated the maimed, the discourse that the Tzemach Tzedek told him in thought. So these thought, speech, and action are extremely, extremely powerful. Okay, everybody should have a very good week.